All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're opening up the case file on the U.S. intervention in Venezuela. Our source material digs way past the headlines to point at something else entirely, a motive that's buried deep inside the global financial system itself. Time to start the investigation. So, here's the central question, the one we're trying to crack. Why Venezuela? And why now? To get to the bottom of it, we have to treat this like a cold case, and every good investigation starts with the official story. You've probably heard the official reasons, right? They're the ones that make up the public case for getting involved. To restore democracy, to fight drug trafficking, and to put an end to terrorism. That's the story we're all given on the surface. But our source material pulls back the curtain and points to a completely different motive. The core claim is that this isn't really about democracy or drugs. It's about the very survival of the US dollar. So, what kind of evidence could possibly back up a claim that big? Well, to understand that, we first need to pop the hood on the global financial system and take a look at the secret engine that's been powering American economic dominance for the last 50 years. And that engine is called the petrodollar system. Here's the thing, it isn't some natural product of the free market. Nope, it's a very specific deal. The heart of the agreement is that all oil, traded anywhere in the world, has to be bought and sold in US dollars. This creates this constant, artificial demand for American currency, because every single country needs dollars to buy energy. Now, a system like this doesn't just happen by accident. It was built. Back in 1974, Secretary of State Henry Kissinger hammered out a game-changing deal with Saudi Arabia, which was the world's top oil producer. And that single agreement has been the foundation of the dollar's power for half a century. The deal itself was pretty simple, a direct trade. Step 1, the oil producers agree that they will only sell their oil in US dollars. Step 2, in exchange, the United States provides them with military protection. It's basically a currency monopoly in exchange for security, an algorithm that's been running the global economy in the background ever since. So when you have a system that's this important, you can bet that any threat to it is going to be met with force. Our source identifies a really clear historical pattern. Any leader who dares to challenge this dollar for oil deal seems to face some pretty severe consequences. Just look at the timeline our source lays out. It's pretty stark. In 2000, you have Saddam Hussein in Iraq starting to sell oil in euros. Fast forward to 2009, Libya's Gaddafi starts talking about a gold-backed African currency for oil. Then, in 2018, Venezuela's Maduro begins trading oil in Chinese Yuan. You see the pattern? 3 leaders, 3 different decades, but all doing the exact same thing, trying to sell oil in something other than the US dollar. And the result for Iraq? It was swift. In 2003, the country was invaded. And one of the first things to happen after the regime change? You guessed it. Iraq's oil sales were immediately switched right back to being priced only in US dollars. For Libya, the outcome was just as brutal. After Gaddafi proposed that gold dinar, NATO intervened in 2011. This infamous quote from then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, well, it pretty much says everything you need to know about how that challenge to the petrodollar system ended. Okay, so this historical pattern brings our investigation right to Venezuela's doorstep. According to the source, Venezuela isn't just another challenge. It represents maybe the biggest threat the petrodollar system has ever seen. And the reason for that is pretty simple: scale. We're talking 303 billion barrels of proven oil reserves. Let that sink in for a second. That's more than Saudi Arabia. It is the single largest known deposit of oil on the entire planet. That gives Venezuela a kind of leverage that countries like Iraq and Libya just never had. And Venezuela was absolutely using that leverage. They started selling their oil in Chinese Yuan. They asked to join the BRICS economic alliance. They started working closely with Russia, China, and Iran, all major players in the push to move away from the dollar. And maybe most importantly, they were actively building the financial plumbing to bypass the dollar altogether. This slide really gets to the nuts and bolts of the threat. For decades, if you wanted to move money internationally, you had to use the US-controlled SWIFT system. But Venezuela was a key player in using and promoting the alternative, China's CIPS system. Think of it as a parallel financial highway, one designed to operate completely outside of American control. Now, it's really important to get this. Venezuela isn't acting alone here. Their challenge to the dollar is happening in the middle of a much bigger, global shift away from the dollar. The system is getting hit from multiple sides all at once. The BRICS group, the one Venezuela wanted to join, now accounts for 40% of the world's entire economic output. I mean, this is not some fringe movement anymore. We're talking about a massive economic powerhouse that has both the reason and the resources to build a real alternative to the dollar. And this whole trend is picking up speed. Get this, even Saudi Arabia, the original partner from that 1974 deal, is now publicly talking about selling oil to China in yuan. Meanwhile, Russia and Iran have almost completely ditched the dollar in their own trade. You could see the pillars of the whole system are starting to show some serious cracks. So when you look at it through this lens, our source argues that the intervention in Venezuela isn't some confident show of strength. It's more like a desperate gamble, a move to stop the bleeding and to make a very public example out of a major challenger. This quote from a high-level U.S. advisor is really telling. It calls Venezuela's nationalization of its own oil theft of American wealth. What that suggests is this deep-seated feeling of ownership over Venezuela's resources, almost like because American companies developed the oil fields, the oil itself is somehow American property. The conclusion drawn from this whole pattern of behavior is blunt but clear. The message being sent to any other country thinking about ditching the dollar is unmistakable. If you challenge our currency, you risk military intervention. It's a warning shot for the entire world to see. But here's the final twist in the argument from our source. Using force like this is actually an admission of economic weakness. Think about it. If you have to force other countries to use your currency, it suggests that your currency can't really compete on its own anymore. It's a sign that the system is in decline, not that it's strong. And that leaves us with this final, really thought-provoking question. This entire strategy depends on having overwhelming military power. But what happens when that's not enough anymore? What happens when major economic players, like the BRICS nations, can offer protection or fight back economically? What does the future of the global financial system even look like then? That's the question this analysis leaves us to think about.